It's time. Time for General Electric to begin reinvesting in America. In good jobs. In our communities. And in our workers who made the company a legend. GE has a chance to be part of our future.
Expanding domestic green energy will help GE and will help revitalize the economy across the country.
When defense contractors like General Electric outsource good jobs in our communities, it compromises our ability to respond quickly in a crisis.
Right now, it's time for GE to give workers in America the chance to build back better with green energy and union jobs.
Good morning, and welcome to the GE Stakeholders Meeting. Today, we are bringing together the voices of our partners across the country who have a stake in the future of General Electric. Our coalition represents GE workers and retirees, environmental advocates, veterans, members of Congress, and economic experts, all of whom are united in calling on GE to stop its decades-long practice of offshoring our jobs and reinvest in American manufacturing in our communities. Today, you will be hearing from some of these voices. What happens at GE matters to America. There are many people in this country who have a lot riding on GE's fate. No one is more invested in the future success of GE than GE workers themselves. We built GE. We want to see GE be a great American manufacturing company again. From over 55,000 GE employees and their families who live in over 70 communities across the country where GE is an employer, to hundreds of thousands of GE retirees, to millions of customers of GE Power, GE Healthcare, GE Aviation products. These are the GE stakeholders. With GE spending $2.5 billion to break up the company and $3 billion on stock buybacks, it's more important than ever that all stakeholders, not just Wall Street, have a say in the company's future. In the past several decades, GE has offshored thousands of jobs. GE's workforce in the United States has been slashed from over 270,000 in the 1980s to less than 70,000 a day. Meanwhile, GE has been building mega facilities in countries such as India and Vietnam, where workers are exploited with low wages. Offshoring and underestimating the workers of America has not been a successful playbook for GE, and it's time for the company to reverse course. GE has a chance to write the future by doubling down on American manufacturing with both green and military aviation manufacturing. The right path for GE is clear. Seize the opportunity to reinvest in the workers of America by creating good union jobs, especially after receiving over $2.2 billion in taxpayer-funded subsidies and bailouts to bankroll their operations. Our coalition has several key demands from GE. Invest at least $5 billion over the next 5 years and add 35,000 jobs to existing and recently shuttered U.S. facilities. Reshore all U.S. military aviation production and 70% of GE industrial work offshored over the past 5 years. Let shareholders vote on proposed breakup of GE and add elected worker representatives to the GE board of directors. And convert historic GE facilities into multimodal, brilliant factories with supplier parks to minimize supply chain disruptions, building an American offshore wind supply chain on our shores. These demands have become even more critical as GE has recently announced its attempts to split up the company, a move that has been applauded by the hedge fund Trian, which bought $2.5 billion in GE stock in 2015. With the announcement of the split, we feel it's more important than ever that stakeholders have a voice in GE's future. To this end, we are calling on GE to elect a worker to its board of directors. Now more than ever, GE must listen to employees who can provide the on-ground insights needed to strengthen its U.S. operations across the country. GE workers are preparing for the 2023 contract negotiations, and company executives should answer our call for a fair contract that protects good-paying union jobs and invest in our communities. Today, we are calling on GE to do the right thing, to reinvest in America, in manufacturing, in our communities, and in our future. I am proud to have the support of Chris Shelton, President of Communication Workers of America, who is standing with us in our fight for a future of American manufacturing. Please welcome Chris Shelton.
Good morning, brothers and sisters, and thank you, Carl, for that kind introduction. Brothers and sisters, I'll get right to the point here. Big corporations have a problem. Over the past 40 years, they've allowed big investors to guide their business toward one goal: more profits for the investors. As a consequence, workers, communities, and our environment have suffered. We're seeing that in action in GE. Driven by Wall Street, GE is about to spend, listen to this, $2.5 billion to break up the company and $3 billion on new stock buybacks. That's $5.5 billion that is going to bankers and lawyers and middlemen instead of to updating and expanding manufacturing facilities, paying good union wages, and make sure we are not dependent on other countries for the critical components of our green energy supply chain. Right now, there is no American company building wind turbines here in the United States. Just imagine that for a minute. Not one American company building the latest, greatest energy efficient stuff that's going to be guiding our energy in the future. Not one American company. President Biden and my good friend Chuck Schumer, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes, have worked hard to ensure that whenever possible, federal funds will be directed towards products that are made in the United States. IUE-CWA members are ready and eager to be part of the revitalization of American manufacturing. So many of our members come from families who have worked for GE for generations. They are the true stewards of the company, not the vulture investors and private equity scavengers who swoop in to pull companies apart, take their profits, and move on to their next victim. It's time for GE to step up. Since the 1980s, the company has cut over 200,000 jobs while receiving over $2.2 billion in taxpayer-funded subsidies and bailouts to bankroll their operations. GE must seize the opportunity to reinvest in the workers of America by creating good union jobs. It is the only real path forward. Brothers and sisters, I've known Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer for a very long time. His mother-in-law was a CWA member, and he has never forgotten what being a union member meant to her. He has fought to ensure that federal dollars go toward creating and sustaining union jobs. He secured federal funding to upgrade the Port of Albany with the infrastructure needed to handle heavy wind manufacturing cargo. That means that GE has no excuse not to put IUE-CWA members in Schenectady who already have experience manufacturing turbines to work building the wind turbines we so desperately need. We are very fortunate to have a Senate Majority Leader and a president who spends every day fighting to help working people. It is my honor to introduce my senator from the great state of New York, Chuck Schumer.
Hi, everyone. It's Senator Chuck Schumer, and I'm so glad to join with my friends in one of the greatest unions in America, IUE-CWA. The men and women of this great union have done so much to build amazing products, powering the world's economy, and have made GE a legendary company. We've come a long way in the past 2 years, and if we've learned anything, it's how much America depends on our essential workers and our union workers like you. Please know that every single day, I'm doing everything I can to fight for you. Through the American Rescue Plan, which I led through the Senate, we took care of working families through stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment benefits, securing COBRA benefits, and making sure that people got paid their pensions by bolstering the multi-employer pension plans, which we made sure went into effect without cutting benefits. We also took care of our public sector workforce with $350 billion for state and local funding, including over $24 billion for New York, and I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud that through the infrastructure law, we approved hundreds of billions to rebuild America, expand broadband, and create countless good-paying union jobs, all the while implementing the most robust Buy America policies ever. And of course, we have to keep going. We must make progress on legislation like the PRO Act, which I'm proud to co-sponsor, and I'm going to bring to the floor when we have 50 co-sponsors. We're getting close. We must also finalize our jobs and competition bill, which I've championed for years and will bring manufacturing back to America. And we need big investment to deploy our renewable energy opportunities like offshore wind. And I want to make sure that all of that is done with union labor. But we can't stop there. Clean tech like wind turbines needs to be made in America, and I'm proud to work with your union to make green manufacturing happen in New York again. All federal dollars go for union jobs only. I recently secured $29 million to make the Port of Albany a wind manufacturing hub that would make possible for GE and other companies to manufacture turbines in upstate New York. So let's get this done. I promise that every day I serve as majority leader, I will always stand with each and every one of you to lift working families into the ranks of the middle class. We have a lot of work left, but together we've come a long way. I promise you I'll keep working for you.
Thank you, Senator Schumer, for always standing with us. Our next guest is one of the biggest champions for workers in the U.S. Senate. She stands with us on holding corporations accountable, fighting for workers' rights, and fighting for high-quality union manufacturing jobs. Please welcome our friend, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Hello to everyone at the GE Stakeholder Meeting. I'm glad to be here virtually to have a chance to talk with you. I want to say a special thank you to the Communications Workers of America and to GE Workers United for inviting me. And I'd like to give a special shout out to my friends at Local 201 from the great city of Lynn, Massachusetts. So I'm here today to stand with you as you look to the year ahead and fight for more jobs, for the strength of your unions, and for better benefits. You know, GE is one of the biggest employers here in the Commonwealth. For example, GE's Lynn facility employs thousands of Massachusetts workers with good wages and good benefits. Families in Lynn have worked at the plant for generations, and more workers all across this country need good jobs. As workers and other stakeholders meet to discuss the next year ahead of GE's annual shareholders meeting, this is an opportunity for GE to show its commitment to American jobs, to the unions that you have fought for, and to continue investing in the American economy. Let's remember this. GE is paid hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars every year, which funds defense, aviation, and the energy business, and GE must continue to reinvest these dollars back into American workers and into the American economy. This stakeholder meeting is a chance for GE workers and management to focus on the need to bring jobs back to the United States, to reinvest in domestic manufacturing, and to build secure and sustainable energy and aviation supply chains, including offshore wind. GE built its business with American workers, and it needs to keep its commitment to American workers in Lynn and all across this country. As new opportunities in clean energy and in building new and more robust supply chains present themselves, GE can create American jobs, bring manufacturing back to American communities, and keep growing their business all at the same time. So I stand in solidarity with all of the workers at GE who are fighting so that their jobs, wages, and unions stay strong, and fighting for who we are, fighting for bringing more jobs back, more manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Thank you for having me here, and I'm rooting for all of you.
Thank you, Senator Warren, for standing with us and for calling on GE to make good on the billions in taxpayer dollars they've received by stopping offshoring and committing to reinvesting in growing jobs in our communities. Our next speaker has felt firsthand the impacts of downsizing and offshoring by GE. Please welcome GE worker Christian Gonzalez.
Year service at the GE Power Facility in Schenectady, New York. I have a fiance, a 7-year-old daughter, and my union job at GE has been essential for my family's well-being. I was raised in Schenectady. I would walk downtown every weekend to the local YMCA, and when I crossed State and Erie, I'd look to my left and couldn't help but to see the big GE sign every time, or the big GE meatballs, we would call it. Whenever I saw it, I'd always imagine what it'd be like to work there. All the kids I knew who had everything growing up had parents who worked at GE. In Schenectady, GE was a symbol of opportunity and hope. If you were fortunate enough to get a GE job there, you and your family were set for life. There was a deep pride amongst GE workers, and that pride reverberated throughout our community. So when I was 19 and I was lucky enough to get my first job at GE, I thought I'd made it. I thought I was set. But in recent years, I've become increasingly concerned for my future, my coworkers' futures, for my community's future, and for generations. Schenectady has been a critical manufacturing facility for our nation's power grid. But over the past 40 years, we've seen thousands of jobs disappear from our plant as GE continues to offshore and outsource more and more of our work. At its peak, over 30,000 hourly employees punched in and out every day at our facility. Today, there are just 600 of us left. We at GE want to become the next generation of workers that build the green energy economy. We are ready to build the machines that will power our future, and we're calling on GE to invest in us and our facility. For years, we've built steam turbines and generators, and now we're ready to build offshore wind turbines too. We have the skills, we have the space, and we have the pipeline of workers, but GE has not yet made a commitment to build offshore wind on our shores. Instead, the company continues to offshore work, most recently to Poland. GE just announced its plan to spend $2.5 billion to split us up and another $3 billion in stock buybacks, instead of investing that money in the workers that built this company. Schenectady was nicknamed Electric City back in the early 1900s, and we're ready to be the Electric City once again. GE workers like me are calling for a new chapter in the company's history, one committed to a just transition for power generation for workers like us, workers with the knowledge and expertise in energy manufacturing, in building turbines and generators and other components of our electric grid. We need GE to reinvest in the workers that created the last electric renaissance so that we can do it again. We need GE to bring our work home. Thank you.
It will take all of us to solve today's energy challenges, and we know a thing or two about electricity. Now, when our country needs them most, workers are standing by, ready to innovate and deliver once again. Now is the time for the community, for government, and for General Electric to work together to bring wind turbine manufacturing across the country. The wind power of the future can be built by GE workers today.
Christian and his fellow GE workers stand ready to build GE wind turbines. And our next speaker echoes this call to GE to build a green supply chain here in the United States. We are honored to have with us today a leading voice in environmental and worker justice, Tafari Gabre, Greenpeace USA Chief Program Officer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tafari Gabre. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Greenpeace USA. But more than that, I've spent my life fighting for workers' rights. But I know that none of it will matter if we don't have a safe and stable planet to work on. Greenpeace USA is, like all of you, a stakeholder in General Electric's business, because the decision made by General Electric matter to the planet. We are in a battle to save our planet Earth, our nation, and our entire species from catastrophic climate warming caused by our emissions from burning fossil fuels for energy. And what direction GE takes matters tremendously to that outcome. GE, the company founded by Thomas Edison, the company that ushered the electric era for our entire globe more than 100 years ago, has lost its way. In General Electric's 2020 sustainability report, titled Building a World That Works for Tomorrow, CEO Larry Culp wrote a letter to all of us, fellow GE stakeholders, expressing the company's heightened responsibility to advance sustainability priorities through its, I quote, commitment to our people, communities, and planet, end quote. Last year on May 4th, 98% of investors voted for a shareholder resolution at General Electric's annual meeting, which asked GE to report on whether and how it plans to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions across its businesses and products by 2050 in alignment with the Paris Climate Agreement. GE board supported the resolution. In 2020, GE had announced its goal of carbon neutrality by 2030, but only for the company's direct operation and facilities, scope 1 and 2 emissions. But emissions from GE's products in scope 3 account for a major portion of the company's total emissions. We at Greenpeace USA cannot think a better way for GE to make good on these commitments than by developing a higher domestic offshore wind supply chain that creates good paying union jobs here in the United States. For the global response to climate crisis to succeed on the scale that science demands, governments and industry leaders like GE have a responsibility to make rapid and bold investments in climate action that will accelerate the energy transition in a just way. Culp proudly wrote in 2020 letter to stakeholders that GE will, I quote, innovate our technology and our company to ensure our rise to challenge of building a world that works. But when we see GE spending billions of dollars in stock buybacks to try and affect its stock prices instead of accelerating a green transition, when we see that it intends to spend at least $2.5 billion in related administrative costs to break itself apart into 3 weaker companies exposed to even more slicing and dicing by private equity corporate traders, then GE looks like a company that has the technology, but not the right state of mind. We are in a battle for the survival of our species on this planet. We need to exit fossil fuel incentive energy production. We have no choice. It's survival or it's our disappearance. Make no mistake about that. So GE has enormous responsibility to the world. It produces and in developing even better, amazing wind power turbines and generators that can generate huge amount of carbon-free electricity. It has installed huge amounts of those onshore wind turbines across the globe, with more than 49,000 onshore wind turbines installed in more than 35 countries, and the total installed capacity of 62 gigawatts. And we say that's great, but it makes these wind turbines and generators elsewhere, not in the United States. It's not manufacturing those here in the States, where it does its final assembly. GE is too conscious of the green dollar, of quick bucks, rather than greening our planet. Building green industrial base in America is essential for our green energy transition. The thing about the green technology is that it cannot be hoarded. It needs to be shared. Its use, its installation, and its production has to take place in each continent, or it will fail. We all have a role to play. What GE leadership has been doing is very problematic because it's leaving GE's American workers, GE union workers, stuck in making fossil fuel power generation equipment they have been making for generations. But it won't transition them to making wind power turbines and generators, even though they want to do that work, even though they are extremely skilled and can do that work, even though they know how to do that work. The Biden administration is seeking to install 30 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2030 in America. Some experts have projected that it would be upwards of 2,000 plus turbines. GE wants to win some of this work, but there is no commitment by GE to make any of them here in the United States. That is unacceptable. US GE workers involved today in manufacturing power generation equipment deserve a green and just transition. And the beautiful thing is that transition does not have to cost them one job. In fact, it will create more jobs than they have left with today, after decades of job cuts and disinvestments. That's why Greenpeace USA is here today, as one of so many millions, in fact, billions of General Electric stakeholders to ask for a different course of action from General Electric. We want to say to GE, you have great technology. Don't be selfish with it. Don't be small-minded. Don't think in terms of corporate greed. Think about clean electricity for all. Worry about carbon. Worry about people, not just the price. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tafari, for reminding us of the commitments that GE has made on climate change, and that GE has a chance to make a tremendous impact by making a commitment to building supply chain for offshore wind right here in the United States. Our next guest is another fighter for environmental and worker justice. Please welcome U.S. Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts.
Good morning, and thank you to all the activists, labor leaders, elected officials, and most importantly, the union workers for joining us today. It's an honor to join you, and I'm grateful to IUE CWA President Kyle Kennebrew for his steadfast leadership and for the invitation to speak with you today. I'm so proud to stand with IUE CWA in your Bring It Home GE campaign and your fight to make good-paying union jobs a centerpiece of the clean energy revolution in the United States. Unions built this country, and unions will build our shared, sustainable future. And that is why I reaffirm my call to General Electric to halt its offshoring of work from the United States, to reinvest in its U.S. facilities, and to think innovatively about how the unionized GE workforce could become a leader in the green manufacturing community. GE's aviation plant in Lynn, Massachusetts, just a few miles from where I live and where I grew up, is an historic site of American industry. In 1941, it produced the General Electric 1A, the first working jet engine ever manufactured in the United States. Today, GE's Lynn workforce manufactures some of the most advanced military and commercial jet and helicopter engines in the world. The workers there are the engines of our regional economy, and I'm proud that this factory calls Lynn its home. We have to honor this legacy of exceptional craftsmanship. It is time for GE to bet big on its workers in Lynn and across the country. There is no better way to do that than by restoring to U.S. facilities the production work that GE has offshored in recent decades, and by empowering the IUE represented workforce to spearhead GE's offshore wind manufacturing right here in the United States. I am committed to partnering in these efforts. We need policies to drive deployment of offshore wind turbines to the United States waters. We need policies to propel domestic manufacturing here in the United States. And we need policies that establish union jobs that provide family-sustaining wages. That's why I have worked with unions, businesses, and other stakeholders to introduce the Offshore Wind American Manufacturing Act. This legislation builds off of the success from existing manufacturing tax credits to tackle the specific challenges faced by the offshore wind industry, to reduce high capital costs that manufacturers face in building, expanding, and retooling their manufacturing facilities to produce offshore wind components. My legislation would create a refundable 30% manufacturing investment tax credit to reduce market uncertainty and ensure that offshore wind manufacturing in the United States stays here. It would also offer a refundable manufacturing production tax credit to select offshore wind companies until December of 2030. That's what we need. We need a plan. We need a plan to prevent bottlenecks in installing, operating, and maintaining offshore wind turbines. This legislation also would offer a 10% production tax credit to manufacturers that are constructing vessels that would work on offshore wind projects. Union jobs, again, and central to it all, to provide workers with well-paying jobs. Facilities that want to access the credit would have to pay their workers prevailing wages. So in summary, the Offshore Wind American Manufacturing Act would help us build a robust domestic offshore wind supply chain, build up our union workforce, and build our clean energy future into existence. There are hundreds of millions of dollars of investments at the ready. We need Congress to signal that the United States is all in on a long-term future with offshore wind by passing the legislation. I'm working hard to get it done. And we need GE to harness the once-in-a-generation opportunity by fully investing in Lynn and its facilities across the country. We have the wind at our backs right now. Let's fill our sails and put those winds to work for American industry and for our union workers. IUE, CWA members are part of the fabric of Lynn's history. Now they need to be foundational to our nation's green energy future. Tens of thousands of jobs can be created. Union jobs, good paying jobs. Thank you all for having me here today. Let's bring it home, GE. Put the jobs in Lynn and all across our country.
Thank you, Senator Markey, for shouting out the incredible skills of our GE workforce and for fighting for good green jobs in our union facilities across the country. Sierra Club has been a household name for decades in environmental advocacy. We're honored to have today former Sierra Club CEO, Carl Pope.
Good morning. It's a terrific honor to be here. And it's a very, very important moment for the future of General Electric and the future of America. I want to be blunt. General Electric is hurting. And General Electric is hurting because America is hurting. The very forces that are putting General Electric's major product lines and its economic future at risk, which are being widely discussed worldwide, are the very problems from which America is suffering, in significant part because companies like General Electric have taken the manufacturing side of their business and tried to move it overseas, and it's not working. It's not just not working for us. It's not working for them. General Electric needs to bet on America. And the reason is quite simple. It's no longer selling light bulbs to individuals. It's selling entire networks to America, entire complex systems to communities. General Electric's primary product is the electric network, which connects Americans from the moment a GE turbine is hit by a gust to the moment that a GE-powered electric vehicle carries me across my city. And all of those links are suffering right now from a failure of companies like General Electric to invest in the United States. A company like GE that produces community products and that depends on a healthy community to sell those products and sustain the servicing of those products, which is actually General Electric's biggest profit center, needs a vibrant home market. One of the threats that's coming at GE right now is that the wind turbine business, which has historically been dominated by Europe, and GE was able to buy into it in that context, is now being threatened by the Chinese. Why can the Chinese do this? Because they have a vibrant home market and they invest in that home market and they create jobs in that home markets. General Electric has thousands of megawatts of potential customers who were sitting in queue at federal regulatory agencies. General Electric would like to build and equip thousands of miles of transmission lines, which can't be constructed because the permitting process is so badly broken. The American gridlock, which is threatening General Electric, was created in large part by the loss of good union manufacturing jobs. This is not a new insight. General Electric simply needs to rediscover Henry Ford's great discovery, which was good jobs create great customers. And I learned that lesson about 15 years ago. I was in Cleveland, Ohio with Leo Gerard, then the head of United Steelworkers. And I was introducing Leo to his first wind turbine, which was sitting at the Science Museum on the Cleveland waterfront. Leo looked at the nameplate on the turbine and said, "Carl, this thing weighs 85 tons. It was incidentally, by today's standards, a midget wind turbine, only 85 tons. He said, "How much of that is steel?" And I said, "Well, Leo, it's essentially all steel, except there's a little bit of aluminum and probably a little bit of plastic and a little bit of copper. And there isn't anything else in that." And Leo said, "That's 100 cars worth of steel." And I said, "Let me show you something else, Leo." And I took Leo into the Science Museum to an exhibit I had noted earlier, which was an exhibit of the Sandusky, Ohio DOE laboratory at which that wind turbine had been invented. I said, "Leo, by rights, we ought to be making this here in the United States," which at that point we weren't. And if General Electric continues on its present trajectory, we won't be making again. It would be truly tragic if, having rediscovered the American capacity to invent and build around winds and other technologies, General Electric was to miss the opportunity to rescue its own bottom line and America's well-being by betting again on American manufacturing.
Thank you, Carl. In addition to the potential for green manufacturing at GE, there's tremendous opportunity for GE to reinvest and reshore military aviation manufacturing at our GE sites. We have many GE workers who proudly build and service military aviation equipment, many of whom are veterans themselves. With us this morning to speak about the impact of GE's offshoring and our military supply chain, General John Adams.
I have dedicated my life to proudly serving in the United States Army. I've spent more than 30 years on active duty in a variety of command and staff assignments across the world. My expertise is in defense policy, strategy, intelligence, civil military relations, interagency coordination, and aviation. Historically, taxpayer investments in military technological innovation have opened doors for innovation throughout the economy, in communications, our energy infrastructure, public safety, you name it. We've been able to do this because of one of our strongest national security assets, the skilled American manufacturing worker. The hundreds of thousands of American workers in our defense industry are a crucial part of our military readiness and strength. But when defense contractors like General Electric offshore our military manufacturing and production overseas, they put our nation at risk. Long global supply chains made no sense in a time of relative peace. Now, in today's troubled times, these sprawling supply chains have truly become a threat to our national security. The convergence of the COVID-19 global pandemic, natural disasters made worse by climate change, and rising tensions with other nations crystallize the urgency for change. We need to build and maintain America's defense industrial base so that we are able to be self-sufficient. GE just reported writing down $200 million for the temporary suspension of some of their Russian operations. GE's Russian-made turbines should be made in Schenectady, New York. And the control systems for GE's turbines should be made in Virginia, not in India, where GE shipped those good-paying union jobs 2 years ago. By moving manufacturing back to domestic factories, GE can strengthen our national security and help rebuild the American dream for the communities devastated by decades of manufacturing offshoring. The other part of this equation is that the customer for military equipment suppliers like GE is the U.S. military, funded by our tax dollars. GE has received billions of dollars in contracts and subsidies from the U.S. government over the past several years. Our taxpayer dollars should be spent as they're meant to be spent, for the benefit of our country. As a military officer, our country and our national security are everything to me. I believe in our country. I believe in what we can accomplish together and what we can build. Investing in our manufacturing base is what enabled America to mobilize for war in 1941, and we can rebuild our domestic production power again. As an American company, GE has the opportunity to bring our jobs home and help secure our nation and build a stronger future. By building what we need to win on future battlefields, it's time to invest in the greatest national security asset we have, the American worker. We must bring our jobs home, and GE must reshore its domestic military production.
It's time for General Electric to begin reinvesting in America.
When defense contractors like General Electric wipe out good jobs in our communities by outsourcing U.S. military manufacturing, it compromises our ability to respond quickly in a crisis.
Generations of workers have kept us moving, building power-producing engines for the U.S. and for the world.
I believe in what we can build together as a country. GE, it's time to bring American jobs back home.
Thank you, General Adams, and thank you to our GE workers who've served in the military, and for folks who are making the call to GE to stop offshoring our military aviation work and to bring this work back to our factories. Our next guest is another worker champion who fights for workers on the U.S. Senate floor. Please welcome U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio.
I'm Sherrod Brown. It's a privilege to serve the people of Ohio in the United States Senate. Thank you, Heather Atkinson. Thank you, National President Carl Kinnebrew. Thank you for your work as leaders in your workplaces and your union. For generations, manufacturing was the lifeblood of our state. But you all know what happened. We stopped making things in America. Decades of bad trade policy, bad tax policy, where corporate America roamed the globe on a scavenger hunt to look for cheaper labor. They went south to Alabama and Mississippi and Arkansas when the labor wasn't cheap enough. Then they went to Mexico, and when that wasn't good enough, they went to China. We know what that happened. It meant loss of jobs in communities all over Ohio and all over the Midwest especially. It drove production overseas. It left us reliant on other countries, and it gutted our middle class. Ohio was among the first to feel this. The whole country feels it now in the form of higher prices and empty shelves because these presidents, from Trump to Bush to Reagan, these presidents abandoned this country, betrayed this country in these trade agreements. We need to make more things in America. We're finally seeing what it looks like to have a government that puts American manufacturing and American workers at the center of the economy. We had great news in January with Intel and the GE Aviation Boeing deal. This is a recognition of the skill and the ingenuity of Ohio workers. It shows what we achieved with the White House committed to manufacturing and committed to work, committed to workers. This White House, Joe Biden's the most pro-worker, pro-union president in my lifetime. The other big focus of the next few weeks will be getting innovation and competition bill to help our country better compete with China, getting it to the president's desk. I'm on the conference committee to negotiate the final bill. I'll be fighting to make sure this bill isn't a giveaway to corporate America, but is a pro-worker bill that begins to reshore critical supply chains, that invests in manufacturing, that cracks down on trade sheets. What's particularly amazing is semiconductors invented in the United States with government help. Only about 10% of semiconductors are now made in the United States. The light bulb invented by Thomas Edison, the most recent generation of LED bulbs, 90 used to be made in Bucyrus, Ohio. Now 90% of them are made in China. We want the technologies that will drive the global economy for decades, not only be developed here. We have some of the most innovative people in the world. We want them to be made in America because we have some of the best workers in the world, from sustainable aviation fuel to the next generation of jet engines. We strengthen our infrastructure. We build every component of a clean economy here in America, every solar panel, every wind turbine, every EV. For the first time in a long time, we have real momentum to do something about it. It's up to us to keep this going. You as workers make a huge difference. I thank the IUE CWA for always stepping up for the labor movement and to build a middle class. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Brown, for fighting with us and for speaking on the devastating impacts that offshoring has in our communities. Our next speaker has felt firsthand what happens when offshoring happened at his GE lighting facility in Bucyrus, Ohio. Please welcome GE lighting worker, Will Evans.
Hello, my name is Will Evans. I've been a worker at GE Lighting at Bucyrus, Ohio for over 12 years, and my wife and I are the proud parents of 2 kids. The GE Lighting plant has been an anchor in our community for over 80 years. Bucyrus is a small town and jobs aren't easy to come by. So my coworkers and I come in every day to proudly make light bulbs that light up people's homes across the country. Although there are generations of GE workers represented in our plant, a few years ago, GE decided to sell our plant, leaving our future up in the air. In the time since being sold, our work has been shipped to China, laying off dozens of workers last year. Now we have the news that our plant will be closing its doors in September. It makes no sense to me why GE Lighting can't make light bulbs right here in the community where they have been making them for 80 years. American workers are ready to do this work, and GE Lighting should step up to the plate and keep the light bulbs made in the U.S. Now GE is announcing a splitting up the company, putting even more American jobs in harm's way. I don't want other GE workers to have to face what we're facing here in Ohio, and I'm here to fight for a better future for American manufacturing. GE should invest in its workers and not keep splitting itself up until there's nothing left of the company.
Thank you, Will, for sharing your story and for fighting for the future of GE workers. Our next speaker is going to speak on what happens when corporations like GE allow hedge funds to guide their investments towards profits for investors. Please welcome Dr. Bill Lazanik.
Hello, it's great to be with you. So why is inequality extreme in the United States? And why is employment for so many Americans unstable and tenuous? And why does the U.S. lag China and Europe in many critical new technologies? The basic answer, predatory value extraction. The nation's business corporations are being systematically looted. In some cases, the looting occurs out of regulatory sight by private equity managers who buy up the shares of publicly listed companies, take them off the stock market, load them with debt, downsize the labor force, all for the sake of making the private equity managers incredibly rich by paying them massive dividends. In other cases, the looting takes place in plain regulatory sight, in fact, with regulatory approval, by publicly listed corporations that do massive stock buybacks to manipulate the company's stock price, thereby enriching corporate managers with their stock-based pay and hedge fund managers who time the buying and selling of corporate shares. The Academic Industry Research Network, the nonprofit I lead, dissects predatory value extraction of publicly listed companies. From 2010 to 2020, S&P 500 companies did $5.4 trillion in buybacks, 57% of the profits, in addition to $3.9 trillion in dividends, another 42% of profits. That left about 1% to reward the company's employees for the value-creating work that made the profits possible and for increased investment in the productive capabilities to generate innovative products. Worse yet, corporate managers who do massive buybacks seek to increase profits by price gouging customers and suppressing workers' wages, thus funding even more buybacks so that even more cash can flow into their bank accounts and those of hedge fund managers. Since the mid-1990s, 1980s, I should say, under Jack Welch and Jeffrey Immelt, GE was a leader in doing stock buybacks. Under Immelt, from 2002 to 2015, GE wasted $57 billion in buybacks, 29% of profits, in addition to 61% on dividends. In October 2015, Nelson Peltz disclosed that his hedge fund, Trian Partners, had purchased $2.5 billion of GE stock, about 0.9% of GE's outstanding shares. Trian claimed to be engaged in constructive dialogue with GE and that by taking Trian's advice, GE could boost its stock price to $45 by 2017. That would enable Trian to turn $2.5 billion into $4.5 billion. Note that not 1 cent of the $2.5 billion with which Trian purchased GE shares on the market was invested in GE's productive capabilities. The hoped-for gains would be nothing but predatory value extraction. Immelt and his CFO told the Wall Street Journal that they were completely aligned on the levers, the quote, suggested by Trian to increase GE's stock price. Immelt stated, quote, the buyback opportunity is right in front of us, quote. In 2016, GE paid $8.8 billion in dividends. It's the first year that Trian held the shares, full year. A shade under 100% of profits, plus $22.6 billion in buybacks, another 256% of profits. Nevertheless, in early 2017, Peltz let it be known that CEO Immelt had not done enough to increase the GE stock price. And by June, Immelt announced, with Peltz's boot in his backside, that he was retiring as CEO. In October 2017, Peltz got GE to put his son-in-law and Trian partner Edward Garden on the company's board. From 2016 to 2021, GE's revenues dropped from $120 billion to $74 billion, and its worldwide employment plunged from 333,000 to 168,000. Over the years 2017 to 21, the company's losses totaled $37 billion. In November 2021, as many people have commented, GE announced its proposed breakup into 3 companies engaged in energy, medical equipment, and aviation. The same industrial activities, by the way, on which from the late 19th century, the company had been built. With GE's depressed stock price still representing about 5% of Trian's portfolio, Peltz and Garden have pushed for the GE breakup as a way of creating shareholder value for themselves. How then, with less than 1% of GE's outstanding shares, have Peltz and Garden been able to exercise so much power over GE's resource allocation? For the full story, please read my book, Predatory Value Extraction, How the Looting of the Business Corporation Became the U.S. Norm and How Sustainable Prosperity Can Be Restored. But here it is in short form. First, corporate managers of value extracting insiders aligned with the hedge fund managers as value extracting outsiders in using tens of billions of dollars of the corporation's dollars to do buybacks to manipulate the company's stock price. Second, the U.S. Labor Department and SEC rulings from the late 1980s to the early 2000s have empowered hedge fund managers to assert corporate control by lighting up the proxy votes of asset managers who, as value extracting enablers, are seeking higher yields on their portfolio. Third, the National Securities Markets Improvement Act of 1996 permits a hedge fund to have more than 99 asset managers or rich individuals as investors in its fund without being regulated by the Investment Company Act and Investment Advisors Act, which would prohibit the hedge fund from directly engaging a corporation in a predatory campaign and placing its own representatives on the corporation's board. That, in a nutshell, is why there are predatory value extractors in the boardrooms of major U.S. corporations, doing billions upon billions of dollars of buybacks to loot the revenues created by employees' skills and efforts. So how do we stop the looting? Ban buybacks, put employee representatives on corporate boards, and bar the predatory value extractors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lazanik, for making it clear what happens when there's a lack of financial corporate governance at companies like GE. Another clear element that is missing from GE's governance is a worker voice on the board, the GE Board of Directors. Here to speak further on this is GE retiree Alex Brown.
Fellow stakeholders, I'm Alex Brown. I'm a former Local 201 leader and a GE retiree from the Lynn, Mass plant. For 38 years, I cut parts, assembled jet engines, and worked to make high-quality products. I'm also a shareholder and invested in the long-term success of this company. On Wednesday, I will be presenting the proposal at the GE stockholder meeting to add a democratically elected worker to the board of directors, because workers create essential value for GE. Our knowledge, skill, and care make great products. GE needs someone on the board that cares about the products, knows what it takes to make them, and is invested in the long-term success of the company. I'm disappointed that the current leadership of GE dismissed the qualifications of GE employees to serve on the board. We are not a faction, but rather some of the most loyal members of the GE community. Ours is the voice that is missing on the board. For years, GE has pursued a strategy of risky acquisitions rather than focusing on the sustainability of the core business. It has hollowed out its workforce in the U.S. while relying on taxpayer dollars to subsidize its bottom line. In 1978, when I punched in Lynn, there were about 8,000 union members. Today, there are about 1,175 left. GE should protect and strengthen its workforce to make our company stronger. A worker director understands the importance of rebuilding and stopping offshoring. Enhanced domestic production avoids the recent supply chain bottlenecks that have crippled business. Instead, GE turned itself into an unregulated bank with disastrous results on display during the 2008 financial crash. It continues to extract short-term profits at the expense of long-term investment in workers, equipment, and innovation. With those that built the company, workers and retirees and their communities, we paid the price in continued cuts to our jobs and pay, benefits, and pensions. So a worker on the board brings the knowledge and investment in the long-term viability of the company. A worker director would have interests more aligned with long-term shareholders over a director whose career has been focused on short-term value extraction. This perspective is especially needed as GE seeks to spend nearly $2.5 billion to split up the company. Corporations led by boards that are indifferent or hostile to their workforce are less likely to exhibit the necessary independence that their fiduciary role requires. Adding an employee director would provide diversity that the current board lacks, an invaluable ear to the ground. Shareholders, please vote for Proposal 7 on your ballot. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Alex. Our final speaker today is Dr. Nick Jurovich, who's going to be speaking about how GE's practice of divestment has been a bad business strategy and how they can reverse course by putting meaningful, large-scale investment into our U.S. manufacturing facilities. Over to Dr. Jurovich.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Jurovich. I'm the Associate Director of the Labor Resource Center at UMass Boston, and I'm the coordinating author of a joint report we did with Cornell on building a sustainable future for GE using Lynn and Schenectady as case studies. Thank you to President Kennebrew and all of you for this chance to share our findings. It's a privilege to be here. So we worked on this report for over a year with 16 authors. You've heard from some of them today, including General Adams and Dr. Lazanik. We started by confirming GE's systematic disinvestment in American manufacturing. You've heard the numbers. 4 out of every 5 jobs at GE in the US have disappeared since 1989, and their union density has dropped from 25% to under 10. So why is this happening? This is not your familiar Rust Belt can't compete story, because GE's profits don't come from sales. GE gets its profits from long-term service contracts, and the most lucrative contracts the company signs are taxpayer-funded government contracts. 2 relevant examples: the company is a top 5 defense contractor and supplied 41% of U.S. wind turbines as of a few years ago. In addition to profiting on these contracts, GE receives huge subsidies from every level of government, over $2 billion in the same decades in which it cut 80% of its U.S. workforce. Now, GE is a global company, you might say. It is, and other countries get a lot more for their tax dollars. Take France. When GE planned to buy Alstom, its own evaluations showed GE's Schenectady operations were 4 times more efficient. By the time the deal was done, French officials up to the president had stepped in. Guess which jobs survived? And lest you think I sound conspiratorial, this was all reported in the Wall Street Journal. Simply put, our tax dollars bankroll GE. Our report recommends GE reinvest those profits in the communities that have sustained the company for generations. We also recommend new industrial policies to compel GE to do so. And you've heard some of our elected representatives speak about those today. This is not just a matter of jobs and justice, important as those are. We have endured myriad crises over the past few years. They've shown us just how fragile global supply chains are and how fickle reliance on fossil fuels can be. We've seen defense production held up by supply chain issues and power grids compromised. Folks across the political spectrum have increasingly argued that restoring U.S. manufacturing is a national security issue. I would add that climate change is too. We cannot hope to build the renewable energy sector we need, from parts to assembly to energy production, in piecemeal fashion. And this brings me to GE's split, which was announced the same week we released our report. Now, as you've already heard, this big news amounts to more of the same short-term thinking. Within a week, the Financial Times was reporting that hedge funds were plotting the further dismemberment of the company's GE plans to spin off. With those folks at the helm, it's going to be even harder to generate the long-term investment in U.S. manufacturing that national security and the climate crisis demand, and that GE workers and communities deserve. Now, to be clear, our report is not only critique. We do cite examples of alternative models at GE, partnerships with the Air Force in Oklahoma, and Tennessee Valley Authority requests for domestic production of power equipment. At the moment, these are the exception, not the rule. But our report shows that GE's plants all across the U.S. have the skilled workforces, the infrastructure, and the ideal locations we need to scale up domestic defense and clean energy production. To close, we wrote this report because we believe that when we understand how GE's business works and how our policies shape it, we can begin to chart a new course toward a sustainable future for GE, for workers, and for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for painting that picture of what GE could be if it decides to reinvest in our American manufacturing facilities. And for our final closing remarks, back over to IUE CWA President Carl Kennebrew.
On behalf of IUE and our GE workers across the country, we want to thank all of our speakers and stakeholders who joined us today. The future of the most important American manufacturing company is on the line. GE workers built this iconic American manufacturing company. GE workers and our stakeholder partners are calling on GE to make the challenge of this moment and once again invest in our workers, in our factories, and in our communities. Thank you.
It will take all of us to solve today's energy challenges.
Union workers protested outside Senator Rob Portman's office this morning, upset about General Electric's lighting plants in northern Ohio shutting down.
We're here today to demand that GE executives stop destroying our plant, stop destroying the U.S. industrial base, and reinvest in America.
Our community has manufactured essential products for GE and for America for generations.
And we will ensure our nation has the green, family-sustaining union jobs it needs to power ahead.
Members of the IUE-CWA picketed outside the senator's Columbus office and delivered him a petition asking him to protect American jobs.
GE, it's time to bring American jobs back home.